So once your threads are all secure on the card, there are a couple of ways that you can get them off of the card. So I will show you on this green one. So you can see that I've tied this knot on here. You can sort of loosen this by pulling, I pulled that loop part of it, and by loosening it a little bit you could then pull one of the strands off like this. So I'm holding it with my right hand and then pulling the thread off with my left, and then that leaves all of these still tied on. So this is a 6-stranded cotton, which means that if you tap the end of the thread, you can see that it splays apart and there are 6 different strands within this thread. So if you wanted to separate them out, because most patterns use 2 strands of a 6-stranded thread, so check what your pattern says first. I hold it between my thumb and my first finger and then I tap it, and then I can sort of see the individual strands. At this point I would then grab hold of one of the strands and pull it. And I'm doing this individually so that they don't get knotted up or anything like this. So you can either use one strand and fold it in half, which will make it 2-stranded, or you can pull out a second strand from there. The other way you could take it off the card, and I've had mixed success with this, it was a friend that had tagged me into it online, is doing it directly from the card. So I'll show you on this yellow one here. So rather than taking off a whole 6-stranded piece and then separating it out, I'm actually going to hook the needle into an individual strand. So that's just the one strand there, and then I'm going to hold it with my left hand and start to pull it with my right, and you want to make sure that it doesn't knot up with all the other threads. So I'm then going to pull it, and that's got an individual strand of thread off of the card. So if you can see it here, it probably doesn't show against the wood. So then when it comes to threading up your needle, you want to line up the 2 ends of your thread, because you're sewing with 2 strands typically, and you want these to both be kind of matching each other in length. So you can see like that, and just make sure they're sort of sitting nicely all the way through. Then I would recommend licking the end of the thread and holding it really tightly between your thumb and your forefinger. Let me just get this into camera. So I'm holding it really tightly at the very edge of my thumb and forefinger. Now, rather taking the thread to the needle, I'm holding the thread still and I'm going to take the needle to the thread instead. So I'm holding it really tightly, and then I just place the needle down on top and pull that through, and that is the tail of your thread. Now if you had 2 individual strands, then you would just tie a knot in the other end. So I tend to do 2 knots, one on top of the other. Let's get this into focus. So I wrap it round my my fingers, and then I push the end of that thread through the loop, and then I pull that knot, and you can just about see there's a little knot there, and I'll just do it a second time. So I'm wrapping it round my fingers, pushing the end through the loop, and then I'm just pulling the knots. Now I've got 2 knots, see if it shows up more on the white. So I've got 2 knots, one on top of the other, and that will stop it coming through. The other way I quite doing it, because these are a really nice long length, so I use one strand and fold it in half, which then becomes a 2-stranded cotton. But also you've then got this fold already into place, so then when it comes to taking your first cross stitch, I'll just show as an example. So you would come up from the back and then go down, and then because there's not a knot, obviously there is a risk that this will pull all the way through, but if you put your needle through that loop, then that has now secured it on the back of your work without a knot, and then you're ready to just get going with your cross stitch. So that is how I would take the threads off the card, thread up the needle, and then start the cross stitch.